Today, the topic that I am going to talk about is gratitude. And I went to one of the slogans of the 7 points of mind training to start out with. And one translation of this slogan is be grateful to everyone. And this seems to be the most common translation of that slogan. I really don't know what the Tibetan says, but I like the way Tralig Rinpoche in his Lojong book translates this slogan, and it gives it more depth. The slogan is, in his words, meditate on the great kindness of everyone. So I'm going to start with that. And so mindfulness, appreciation, and gratitude are extremely important to well-being. With a mindfulness, we're paying attention to what's going on in our lives. And with appreciation, we appreciate what's going on in our lives. And from that appreciation, then, of course, springs gratitude. Being grateful to, if it's people that have brought about what we are appreciating, grateful to the people that caused that. And a lot of times it is nature. Personally, I get a lot of enjoyment and even joy from trees, seeing how they grow, their shape. They're beautiful in the summertime when they're full of leaves, in the fall when the leaves change colors. Again, it's a different kind of beauty. And then in the wintertime, like right now, when the leaves are gone, you get to see the structure of the trees, the trunk, the main branches, and then the branchlets from that. And they all have their own individual shape depending upon the species of the tree, the age of the tree, and with hardwoods, there can be a tremendous difference between one tree and another. So getting back to people, I'm going to go and dwell on that for a little while before I get back to nature. Tralig Rinpoche, right off the bat, in his commentary on this slogan says, quote, "From the cradle to the grave, other people do things for us, even if we think we are neglected and unloved." And this actually was a great help for me because I had a difficult childhood. But when I looked into it more deeply, I realized that I owed my body to my parents. All of us owe our body to our parents, whoever they are, even if we never even met our parents, even if we are adopted. That two people gave us our body, and as long as we are alive, it is our body that keeps us alive. And so our bodies are very important. If we want to study and practice the Dharma, we need a body, unless we go to Dewa Chen. But none of us are there now. We are here in this physical world, and having a body is extremely important. And then people had to provide enough food for us to survive, clothing, shelter. And probably medical care too. Vaccinations in this day and age. Most people get vaccinations and it pays off. We needed to learn how to speak English or whatever language is our original language, but all of you that are attending this now or teaching are English speakers. But we needed to learn a language so that we could communicate with other people. And also language gave us the ability to read, to understand teachings, to be present at a teaching and understand it, to work with concepts, to remember concepts, and so on and so forth. It's actually a very long list of things that other people gave us as we were growing up. And there's a wide variety of people that did these things for us, not just our parents. Here, another quote from Trungpa Rinpoche is, practically all of the pleasure, joy, and happiness that we experience comes to us because of the presence or activities of others. And so it's really beneficial to examine our lives, examine what it is that we like, what we enjoy in life, what makes our life easier and more comfortable, and so on and so forth. And do an analysis. Where is it coming from? I just did grocery shopping this week, and because of the COVID, I do online shopping and then curbside pickup. And I buy it in larger quantities now than I would have before to keep the driving down. Before I was driving around a lot for Dharma reasons, and I would just shop at the end of a Dharma trip, you might say. But I was thinking today, because I had all this food in the house, that a lot of it I really don't need. I could survive quite well without it. But I like it for one reason or another. And it is, of course, other people that produce it, that transport it to the warehouse, and from the warehouse to the grocery store, and then stock it on the shelves. And then in my case, someone has to go through the store and with a shopping cart and put it in the shopping cart, my shopping list. And then when I get there, somebody comes out and puts it in my trunk, and I leave. And all of this is done by other people. And of course, in order to do this, I need an internet connection. I need a device to use the internet. I need a cell phone when I get there to let them know that I am there. I need a car. I need gasoline in the car. I need to have the car maintained properly, and insurance, and on and on and on and on and on. And actually, it's quite complicated, and it involves a huge number of people. And if we think about our lives this way, we find that there are people all over the planet that are working, and they probably don't have a clue of who we are, or even that they're helping us in some way or another, but in actuality, they are. My online grocery order yesterday, and actually I placed it the day before, and I made a mistake. I had the wrong grocery store. It was part of a chain. Prepare the order, and I realized this very quickly. So I called up to see if I could just switch stores with the order. And of course, the person that I talked to said, no, you can't do that. But then what really surprised me was how much care she took with me. And she became an IT person at this point. She said, you actually have to go in and to settings and make all kinds of changes. And so I was just going, okay, okay. And she said, are you doing this? And I said, okay. And she just spent something like 4 or 5 minutes walking me through doing all the changes that was necessary to have it set up so that when I turned the order in, it would go to this other grocery store, even though it was the same chain. She said that the different stores with the same name actually have different owners, and that's what the problem is. So anyway, she was very kind to me. She was very nice to me. And when we look at our lives this way, for transportation, whether it be public or private transportation, our clothes, our health care, our water. If you live in the city here, I have a well, but again, since I have been here, I've had to have a submersible well, a pump put in. Had to have it changed at least once. I had to have some maintenance on it. Had a new septic tank and system put in, and on and on and on. Electricity is the same thing, that there is a company that produces electricity and then sells it to us. They put out the lines, the transmission lines. Communications, cell phones, internet, just on and on and on. Everything in our lives that we really find useful. Seems like it comes from somewhere else, that we're not anywhere near as self-sufficient as we think we are. And if you look back on your life, you will find that as you have gone through life, people, perhaps friends, perhaps relatives, perhaps your parents, perhaps a partner, have benefited you in many, many different ways. I remember, for instance, in my life, when I was in high school, I think it was 15 years old, that the father of one of the girls in my circle of friends, he kind of befriended me and spent some time with me, not necessarily alone, but he had a boat on a lake, and he would take the family out. And sometimes I would be invited to go along on this family outing. And he did some other things for me. And it really, befriending me like that made a huge difference. Or thinking of my grandmother. And we can all do this. And I'm giving these examples of myself to kind of help you might say, jumpstart you thinking about these things in your life, about how people have helped you in one way or another. And it may have been very insignificant. It may have been that they didn't even know that they were helping you. It may be that originally it looked like to you or to them they were harming you. It's really important to, when you're out in public, to start seeing this and appreciating other people, especially the people that are working in the stores that are benefiting you. It may be that that particular clerk is having a bad day. It may be that that clerk is working, doing what he or she is doing because they're desperate and they couldn't get a better job, and so on and so forth. And they may not even be friendly and they're doing it, but they're still helping you get your goods paid for and helping you get you out of the store and on to what you're going to do next. If we look at the Dharma, that in order for us to practice Dharma, the Buddha had to have lived. He had to have meditated, attained enlightenment, and then taught. If he wouldn't have taught, nobody would have known. His disciples memorized the talks that he gave. And a few hundred years later, they were written down, and we call them the sutras now. They practiced and attained a certain level of realization and passed down what they knew to their students. And this went on from master to student up until the present time. So there is this unbroken lineage of teachings that are available to us. And so we can develop a great appreciation for the Dharma and great appreciation for everybody in the past that has kept these teachings alive. It would be very different if these teachings had died out, but somebody or a group of people came across books with these teachings in them, and then they started to practice, because the lineage would be broken and the teachings wouldn't be pure. They would have to guess at what the meaning is and so forth. So we can have a lot of gratitude towards all the people, men and women, who have practiced the Dharma and helped make it available to us. And this would, of course, include people that are donors, that are benefactors, where they may not be great practitioners themselves, but they donate money so that the Dharma can be preserved. Monasteries and nunneries and teaching centers can be maintained and open to the public. So these are ways of helping to develop appreciation for others and gratitude. Now, there are blocks to this. There is a saying of white privilege, and I'm going to modify that a little bit, and I'm going to call it ego privilege. that frequently we have a feeling of entitlement, that these things, you might say, are owed to us. I like to use the example of a child at Christmas time. And if you have ever been around a young child at Christmas time when it's time to open the presents, you know what I'm talking about. And I suspect that most of us behaved this way when we were young, if there were a lot of presents under the Christmas tree. And so the child comes down. It's time to open the presents, and there are lots of them under the Christmas tree. There's a big family. There are other children. And so the child goes and opens up the first present, looks at it, sets it down, and goes back and finds another present. Opens it up, looks at it, sets it down, goes back looking for another present. Finally, there are no more presents to open. And the child looks at one of the parents and says, "Is that all?" And so we want to avoid this kind of attitude that where we feel the world owes us what we want, when we want it, and so forth. That this can be a huge problem. And of course, it makes life miserable. With mindfulness, you'll find that as you go through your day, that you are opening little presents continually that you can appreciate. So it's important to pay attention to the little details of our experience, that life is what's happening right now in the present. And there's just so much to be grateful for, to first appreciate and then to have a sense of gratitude. And it can be everything from eating your lunch, drinking a cup of tea, um, having a conversation with somebody else. It could be looking out the window and seeing the sun shine in the window. Could be anything. Actually, sometimes lightning is quite beautiful. When we look at it the other way about, is that all? Then what happens is we become rigid. We actually narrow our world down. Our habits are disempowering. We, we kind of look at the world like it's working against us, especially if we start complaining and start seeing difficult people as huge problems, when in fact, difficult people enrich our world. Difficult people make us wiser and stronger. They help us develop patience. They help us deepen our kindness. And frequently, what upsets us in other people is our own faults. And so it's really good when you run into a difficult person to examine yourself with the idea of, do I ever do that? Have I ever done that to somebody else? And if I did they feel the way I did when I did that? Do they feel the way I did when that just happened to me? So we can actually use difficult people, angry people, and so forth, um, to help strengthen our patience, strengthen our appreciation for other people. On the other hand, if you're not a bodhisattva, excuse me, if you're not training to be a bodhisattva, then this might be beyond your capacity. But in Tibetan Buddhism, everybody is encouraged to be on the bodhisattva path. But if this is beyond you, then of course it's just try to avoid getting upset and try to avoid difficult people and difficult situations, which, needless to say, is just about impossible if you go out the door. But what we need to have is the proper motivation to do, to be able to turn difficult people and difficult situations into a way of improving our practice and becoming wiser and stronger, you might say, spiritually stronger. Tralling Rinpoche quotes from Shantideva about these difficult people. Quote, "So like a treasure found at home, enriching me without fatigue, all enemies are helpers in my bodhisattva work, and therefore they should be a joy for me." So that kind of sums up that. And again, this idea of joy is important. There's another slogan in the 7 Points of Mind training, and it is always have a joyful mind. So we can apply a joyful mind when we are appreciating, you might say, the good things in life, or when we are experiencing difficult circumstances, situations, difficult people. That, again, these situations and people allow us to, you might say, build our spiritual muscle. That by overcoming an obstacle, it increases our resilience and our intelligence. There is a Kadampa saying, and the 7 Points of Mind training came from the Kadampa tradition. But when I first heard this, it was like, I understand this. And quote, this is again from Tralling Rinpoche's book on page 98. The metaphor used in the Kadampa teachings again and again is that the manure of experience becomes fertilizer for the field of Bodhi. And Bodhi here means enlightenment. So I have shortened that up into talking about the manure of our experience. And of course, the idea is that manure is a very fertile resource. It's excellent for growing things. And so difficult people, difficult circumstances, and so forth are very, very fertile for us to grow spiritually. Again, some of you have heard me say this, that if we look at these difficult people and difficult circumstances as crap, it's a problem. If we look at them as manure, it's a resource. And we find that we are wealthy in natural resources, quote unquote. So our response to adversity depends on how they affect our lives, and we get to choose. That if we work with it in a positive way and come to appreciate it, uh, we tend to then develop a wide range of experience. Our world broadens. We value diversity. If we don't, we go in the other direction, which is to retreat, to shrink the world, to blame. We close up to protect ourselves from being hurt. And ironically, end up hurting ourselves more. But it is a familiar hurt, and we're comfortable with it. Trungpa Rinpoche brings out this point, which I think is very important, and that is that when we blame ourselves for difficulties and troubles, that it actually causes more harm than the situation itself. The situation ends, and 10 years later, we're still blaming ourselves from time to whatever came up then. And that's a huge problem. So to finish up here, I've got a few other points that I would like to make. And this is talking about appreciation, gratitude, and well-being. There are other elements of well-being, but appreciation and gratitude are very important elements of it. So mindfulness is an important element of well-being. Generosity is an important element of well-being, and I've talked about that recently. And finally, having a positive outlook is important. That our habit of thinking or our habits of thinking are important. That actually positive thinking is easier than negative thinking. That with positive thinking, we generate more well-being for ourselves. And of course, gratitude fits right in this part of positive thinking. Gratitude is positive thinking. Being grateful, appreciating. Positive thinking allows us to bounce back from adversity, where negative thinking just makes things worse or at least delays recovery, delays getting back to where you were before the adversity arose. So the question is, does positive thinking keep one from seeing dangers that are present, problems, and so forth? Well, first of all, positive thinking is easier than negative thinking. It actually takes work, more work, to engage in negative thinking. And along with that negative thinking, then there is suspicion. Suspicion about the world, distrust, and it gets to be quite a heavy burden to hold. And it leads to a sense of loneliness. And even if you don't distrust other people, most people don't want to hang around a person that is complaining all the time. Unless there are other people that want to chime in and agree with you about how bad things are. The Karmapa feels that having habits of thinking positively lead to less hardship in your present life. That it's actually a very good strategy for having less hardship. And he feels that your attitude of your positive attitude does not have to be 100% reflection of reality. That it's all right to, you might say, go a little bit beyond that reality. And so this is a way of creating more well-being for yourself. And to go back to appreciation and gratitude, this is a really good way of developing positive patterns of thinking and attitude. Mindfulness is really important here because without mindfulness, what happens is that we are very focused on our work or whatever else we are doing during the day. But then evening comes and we're not satisfied. That we've been distracted and really haven't paid attention to what we have accomplished and what we have experienced. We're so distracted that we didn't appreciate what we had done. And now it is evening, and we just feel that there's kind of a lonely, hollow place. On the other hand, with mindfulness, when evening comes around, there's more of a sense of contentment, of spending the day in a valuable way and appreciating how the day went. Contentment is a great source of natural wealth. And so with contentment, then well-being will naturally arise. It will arrive too once it arises. So without mindfulness, this is very difficult. Contentment really will not arise without mindfulness. So to kind of sum things up here, with mindfulness, we can appreciate simplicity. It makes it easier for us to appreciate and access happiness, that we can just pay attention to very ordinary things that we usually overlook and don't appreciate. And then from this appreciation comes gratitude.